What happens when a duchess demands to be carried down 6th Avenue like a queen on a throne? No, this isn't satire. No, it wasn't a parody float. And no, Macy's wasn't in on the joke. Thanksgiving Day 2025 was supposed to be a feel-good celebration, a pageant of balloons, marching bands, and celebrity cameos meant to delight millions of American families gathered around the TV. But behind the glimmering surface of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, a bizarre backstage drama was unfolding. One so audacious, so surreal, it left stunned staffers whispering, "Is this actually happening?" At the center of the storm? Meghan Markle. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Yes, that Meghan Markle. Former actress, former working royal, global brand ambassador of polished podcasts and curated vulnerability. And apparently, if eyewitnesses and leaked reports are to be believed, the would-be Cleopatra of Midtown Manhattan. This is the story the cameras didn't catch. The story that blew up behind the scenes, causing chaos in production trailers, scrambling security, and ultimately ending with the kind of headline even Meghan's most cynical critics couldn't have imagined. Meghan Markle escorted out of Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade after demanding to be carried in a sedan chair. But this wasn't just a moment of diva drama. No. This was the boiling point of a far deeper narrative, one about fame, entitlement, rejection, and a woman determined to recrown herself, no matter who she had to walk over. Or rather, be carried over. So what really happened? Let's back up for a moment. In the months leading up to the parade, Meghan Markle had been mounting what some in the industry quietly called her second comeback. After a string of lukewarm projects, including a Netflix docuseries met with eye rolls and an oddly frosty memoir rollout, her brand was in flux. Not quite canceled, not quite beloved, floating in that gray zone between celebrity curiosity and cultural fatigue. And then came the opportunity. Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a cornerstone of American pop culture, watched by millions, a spectacle of whimsy, nostalgia, and soft power. What better platform to reclaim the spotlight? According to sources inside the entertainment booking pipeline, Meghan's team had been in quiet talks with producers since early September. The initial pitch? A surprise appearance. Brief, graceful. She'd wave from a float themed around resilience or empowerment. Nothing too flashy, just enough to generate headlines without stoking backlash. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. It wasn't enough to just appear. Meghan didn't want to blend in. She wanted to ascend. Literally. That's when the whispers of the chair began. Parade insiders first heard murmurs of it during a creative logistics call. One staffer, under strict anonymity, described the moment Meghan's rep floated the concept. She asked if it would be feasible for Meghan to be carried. Yes, carried. Down the parade route on an ornate sedan chair. At first, we thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Over the next several weeks, communications reportedly intensified. Meghan's team sent mock-ups, sketches, and even historical references. Marie Antoinette, Queen Elizabeth I, and Cleopatra. The message was clear. This wasn't about participating in the parade. This was about making an entrance. A statement. A coronation of one. And that's where everything started to unravel. Because here's the thing. The Macy's parade isn't a royal procession. It's not Buckingham Palace. It's not a personal platform for a Duchess-turned-content creator with a penchant for myth-making. It's a collective celebration. Commercial, sure. But it runs on structure, planning, and respect for the stage, not spontaneous theatrics. But Meghan? She came to rewrite the script. What followed was a tense standoff between tradition and disruption. Production versus spectacle. Crowd control versus ego control. And at the heart of it, a woman still chasing the crown she lost, in a land that never promised her one. Why does this matter? Because this story, outrageous as it sounds, isn't just about one parade. It's about a pattern. A pattern that's become eerily familiar in Meghan's public trajectory. Ambitious entry, rising drama, reputational backlash, victim narrative, and eventual reinvention. We've seen it with the royal family. We've seen it in the Spotify saga. We've seen it with archetypes, Invictus, Suits nostalgia tours, even red carpet appearances. And now, apparently, we're seeing it at America's most beloved family parade. But here's the twist. Unlike previous controversies, where Meghan's actions were filtered through media spin, palace leaks, or controlled documentaries. This time, the meltdown happened in real time, in front of parade volunteers, production assistants, and yes, children. And the public? They didn't need palace press offices to shape the narrative. They saw it for themselves. TikToks, Twitter threads, Instagram reels showing snippets of the commotion, Meghan arguing with parade staff, gesturing toward a gilded structure, pointing at a clipboard, and finally being ushered away by security. Yet even now, days later, her team insists it was all a misunderstanding, a creative miscommunication, that no formal demand was ever made, that the chair was merely a conceptual idea. But the footage? The staffer testimonies? The viral posts from costumed participants recounting how they were asked to physically lift her? They tell a different story. So how did we get here? How did Meghan Markle go from a carefully curated PR comeback to being the most talked about spectacle at the Macy's parade, and not in the way she hoped? In the chapters ahead, we'll take you behind the scenes of this surreal debacle. We'll dissect the minute-by-minute build-up from Meghan's pitch to parade producers, to the high-tension rehearsals, to the moment she reportedly uttered, "If they don't carry me, I walk." You'll hear from insiders who watched the chaos unfold in real time. You'll see the leaked emails, the costume requests, and the luxury chair itself. Yes, it was real, and yes, it was delivered. You'll feel the mounting tension as staffers tried to salvage the event, while Meghan's entourage made increasingly strange demands. And you'll witness the moment security was finally summoned, and the royal illusion came crashing down in the middle of a corporate fairy tale. But don't be fooled. This story is no simple comedy of errors. It's a case study in self-branding gone rogue, in the power of entitlement, in the perils of image obsession, and in what happens when someone tries to turn America's most beloved parade into a one-woman throne room. So buckle in, because the next chapter begins with a golden float that never saw the light of day and a Duchess who refused to let go of the crown, even when the crowd had moved on, who plans a glorious return to the spotlight, only to exit escorted by security. That's the question Hollywood's been quietly asking since Meghan Markle's ill-fated Thanksgiving Day parade spectacle. Because let's be honest, this wasn't supposed to be a public relations disaster. This was supposed to be her moment, her rebirth, her post-palace, post-Spotify, post-criticism renaissance. A royal-style comeback, but on American soil. Curated, glowing, iconic. But here's the brutal irony. The very stage meant to symbolize redemption became the scene of rejection. The throne she tried to build collapsed before it ever left the loading dock. So what went wrong? Let's rewind to the summer of 2025. Meghan Markle had been relatively quiet in the headlines. After the collapse of the Spotify deal, and that awkward executive quote calling her not a great audio talent, her media presence dimmed. Public sympathy had worn thin. Archetypes had stalled. Her memoir hadn't hit as hard as Harry's. Rumors swirled about brand deals drying up, pitches being politely declined, and Netflix growing colder. But behind the scenes, Meghan was planning. This wasn't retreat. It was reset. Her team started planting whispers in entertainment circles that she was exploring opportunities with purpose, that she was focused on impact-driven storytelling, that she wanted to reconnect with the American public on her own terms. And then came the pitch. A high-profile holiday appearance. Not a red carpet. Not a podcast. Something warmer. National. Symbolic. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It was perfect. Every Thanksgiving, over 50 million Americans tune in. It's nostalgic. Family-friendly. A mixture of Broadway, Disney, pop culture, and goodwill. A moment where celebrities become ornaments in the holiday storybook. And if done right, if you wave, smile, maybe throw in a heartfelt line or two, it can be career rocket fuel. Meghan wanted in, but not as just another celebrity sitting on a float. Not as a background figure waving next to a corporate mascot. No, Meghan wanted a statement. According to insider sources, her team initially approached parade organizers with what they called a conceptual partnership. The idea? A modern, inclusive celebration of resilience. Meghan would represent hope, renewal, and personal empowerment. She'd arrive on a specially designed float themed around transformation. Think butterflies, soft gold lighting, and maybe, just maybe, A live performance of Rise Up by Andrew Day. Sounds dreamy, right? But here's where things get complicated. Because even in those early meetings, parade planners noticed something off. The pitch was strangely controlling. Scripts were requested. Camera angles were discussed. A makeup retouch station was included in the float design proposal. There were multiple clauses about Meghan not being filmed unflatteringly. And then came the approval rights. She wanted final say over how her appearance would be edited in post-broadcast highlights. Wait. Since when does anyone get post-control at Macy's parade? A senior producer, who spoke on condition of anonymity, said, "We've worked with A-listers, Oscar winners, Grammy icons. No one has ever sent a 14-page brand alignment dossier for a 2-minute float appearance." Still, the team at Macy's tried to make it work. Meghan was, after all, a recognizable name. And controversy generates attention. So they countered with a scaled-down option, a guest spot on a group float. Alongside several nonprofit founders and public figures doing work in women's advocacy, they expected Meghan to be flattered. She was furious. Reportedly, one of her reps fired back within hours, calling the offer a downgrade and an insult to her global platform. They were shocked. She wasn't being positioned as a solo headliner. The word visionary was used multiple times. You might be wondering, was this ambition or ego? But then came the real kicker. She didn't just want to ride a float. She wanted to be carried. And that's when this pivoted from awkward to absurd. Sources confirm that shortly after her float pitch was denied, Meghan's creative team sent a new proposal. A bold one. She would appear not on a vehicle, but on a ceremonial sedan chair. Yes, the kind carried by footmen in historical dramas, symbolizing reclamation of feminine power and ancestral dignity. The inspiration? Cleopatra, with a sprinkle of Wakanda. All filtered through a Duchess lens, of course. No engines, just elegance. And 4 volunteers, or possibly dancers, carrying her. That sound you just heard? Every parade producer choking on their Starbucks. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, can you imagine a former royal demanding to be paraded down 6th Avenue in a velvet chair held aloft by costumed humans on Thanksgiving morning, surrounded by floats featuring minions and marching bands? Who exactly was this for? Because by now, it wasn't about the American audience. It wasn't about tradition or joy or goodwill. This was about spectacle. This was Meghan trying to reframe the entire parade around her narrative. She wasn't participating in the story. She wanted to be the story. And here's the twist. Some members of her team were reportedly worried. Multiple insiders alleged that junior PR staff and media advisors quietly tried to talk her down, that they urged her to accept the nonprofit float, to focus on warmth over grandeur. One even suggested she do a cooking segment with a school choir instead. She reportedly replied, "That's not my level. That's not the message. Let that sink in. Not her level." This is a woman who spent years positioning herself as a humble humanitarian, as someone misunderstood, as someone stripped of royal titles, but still clinging to purpose. Yet when offered a float that symbolized service, she chose the chair, the throne, the elevation. Now, Meghan's defenders say this is all blown out of proportion, that the chair idea was symbolic, that no formal request was ever made. But here's the thing, there's evidence. Photos of a velvet-lined chair delivered to a parade warehouse days before the event. Staff texts joking about Queen Meghan's entrance. A TikTok from a parade intern showing what appears to be rehearsal positioning for a mystery VIP entrance. The pieces add up, and as the day approached, tension skyrocketed. Macy's executives panicked. They weren't just managing a diva. They were managing a live broadcast with tens of millions of viewers. They couldn't afford a viral meltdown. Not during a sacred holiday tradition. But Meghan? She doubled down. She arrived early, dressed in custom ivory cashmere, surrounded by a stylized entourage. Her makeup artist was flown in from Los Angeles. The chair had been staged. And the mood? Electric. Awkward. Confused. According to eyewitnesses, she expected admiration, but received side eyes. Staff whispered. Fellow guests giggled. One child reportedly asked, "Is she a Disney villain?" Ouch. The gap between Meghan's fantasy and everyone else's reality was growing by the minute. And just as the parade was about to begin, just as floats lined up, cameras rolled, and dancers warmed up, Meghan reportedly pulled her team aside and said something stunning. "Tell them I'm ready to be carried." What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. How do you lose a float that never existed? Because in Meghan Markle's mind, it did. It had to. She envisioned it, pitched it, built an entire public narrative around it, and when reality didn't meet expectation, the pressure cooker ignited. But this isn't just the story of a float proposal that was denied. This is the story of what happens when an A-list fantasy collides with B-list logistics, and no one wants to say no. Let's start with the original concept, the Duchess of Light float. That was the working title, according to emails leaked from someone inside her publicity network. The idea was to create a stunning, ethereal float covered in gold tones, soft light effects, and a trailing fabric canopy designed to mimic angel wings. It would glide, yes, glide, down 6th Avenue, accompanied by a live performance from a children's gospel choir singing an original track titled Rise Within. Sound dramatic? That's just the start. Meghan's team reportedly envisioned a full 3-minute televised segment. She would be introduced not as former Duchess of Sussex, but as global advocate, artist, and changemaker. A brief narration would recount her journey of courage through the corridors of monarchy to the heart of America. Then the choir would rise in unison as she waved to the crowd, spotlight glowing. But that was just the external show. The internal demands were extensive. According to documents reviewed by a former freelance coordinator on the parade production team, Meghan's team submitted a 26-page creative deck. Highlights included a built-in throne-like bench, not called a throne, but that's what it was. Florals flown in from Portugal. An elevated platform for maximum silhouette framing. For custom lighting rigs synced with the sunrise. A clause requiring that no other float within 5 positions before or after features royalty, crowns, or direct monarchical symbolism. Let that last one sink in. She didn't want any other float near hers that could remind the public she wasn't the only royal in the spotlight. Macy's was reportedly stunned. One staffer said, she wanted to control the entire narrative arc of the broadcast for a 3-minute cameo. That's not how this works. And yet, for weeks, Meghan's team kept pushing. They sent revised sketches, color palettes, even choreography notes for the accompanying dancers. The float had themes of rebirth and elevation, they said. It would be tasteful. It would be viral. One version even included animated butterflies flapping from fiber-optic wings across the canopy. They called it magical modern royalty. But magic costs money. When parade execs asked who would fund it, Meghan's team reportedly wavered. First, they suggested co-funding it through a branded partnership. When Macy's asked which brand, no name came. Then they proposed Archwell. Then a private investor. Then silence. Finally, Macy's gave a polite no. There just wasn't time, or space, or budget, or frankly, patience. But Meghan didn't take it as a no. She took it as a challenge. That's when she pivoted. She scrapped the float and shifted the focus inward. If they wouldn't build her a stage, she'd be the stage. Enter. The chair. Let's pause there. Have you ever seen someone deny they're upset while simultaneously planning an act of revenge performance? That's how sources described Meghan's demeanor after the float rejection. Outwardly calm, smiling, grateful for the consideration. But behind the scenes, a flurry of late-night calls, brand strategy meetings, and quiet whispers of Plan B. And Plan B was outrageous. Forget the float. She didn't need Macy's machinery. She just needed herself, the right visuals, and a team willing to carry her. Because if you can't ride a float, why not become one? That's the logic that reportedly fueled the next phase, the ceremonial sedan chair. And yes, it was real. We now know a luxury prop design company in Manhattan received a rush order in early November. Their task? Craft a gold-accented, velvet-lined sedan chair modeled after 18th century French royalty, but modernized. Think soft gold instead of brass. Swarovski buttons. Adjustable lighting built into the canopy. It was delivered 2 days before the parade. But here's where it gets wild. The parade never approved this plan. According to internal communications leaked to the press, Meghan's team never resubmitted the chair concept through official channels. They simply told a junior logistics coordinator that she would be arriving with her custom presentation element and to expect a compact staging unit. That's right. She called the chair a staging unit. No mention of live carriers. No mention of choreographed lifting. Just a suggestion that it would integrate seamlessly into the walking portion of the route. Meanwhile, parade producers scrambled. Word had spread that Meghan was still planning something theatrical. A few even joked that she might parachute in. But once they heard whispers about a chair and live humans carrying it, they knew this was serious. They reached out to Meghan's reps for clarification. What they got back? Radio silence. A senior production official summed it up perfectly. It was like negotiating with a mirage. Every time we thought we had an answer, it vanished. And it wasn't just the organizers who were confused. Other celebrities slated to appear began raising eyebrows. One popular singer, whose name we'll withhold for now, was reportedly furious after being told she'd have to move her slot back to accommodate a potential high-visibility entrance. Another actor, scheduled to ride a float with a group of veterans, allegedly joked backstage, "Are we opening for the Queen of Manhattan now?" It was no longer funny. This wasn't about one woman wanting her moment. It was about one woman trying to rewrite the entire event around her personal mythology. The float was gone, but the ego? Very much still inflated. And then, the rehearsal happened. The night before the parade, participants gathered for a final walkthrough. Meghan didn't attend personally, but her team did. They showed up with a clipboard, a box labeled Emergency Touch-Up KIT, and, most curiously, a clipboard that included a map of the staging area with a marked zone labeled Sedan Hold. Volunteers started whispering. Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. But the logistics team? They panicked. Because nothing about this had been signed off. No security plan. No insurance waiver. No rehearsed route. No permission. This was a rogue float. A rogue performance. A rogue Duchess. And that's when Macy's drew a line. They sent a formal notice to Meghan's team, stating that any unapproved additions to the parade would result in immediate removal. Period. Meghan's reply? She showed up the next morning anyway. With the chair. With the entourage. With full hair and makeup. And reportedly a backup outfit, in case the velvet clashes with the sunrise. And when staffers tried to explain, again, that she wasn't cleared for that level of presentation, she smiled and said, "But the cameras are already rolling. Let's give them a moment. Let that line sit with you. Let's give them a moment." This wasn't about the parade anymore. This was about spectacle, legacy, the viral clip she could share later, the story she could tell in interviews, the brand she could rebuild. Even without a float, she was determined to float. But as we'll see in the next chapter, what she hadn't calculated was what happens when the people who run the parade decide they've had enough. Because the moment she tried to sit on that chair, everything came crashing down. What kind of person walks into America's most iconic family parade and tells organizers they're not walking at all? According to multiple sources, Meghan Markle didn't just suggest her new entrance, she demanded it. And the way it all unfolded? It was less of a professional negotiation and more of a royal-style standoff. Let's set the scene. It's Thanksgiving morning, November 27th, 2025. Just after sunrise, the streets of Manhattan are buzzing. Parade staff are in headsets, balloon handlers are stretching their arms, marching bands are tuning instruments. Celebrities are slipping into position. Producers are triple-checking camera cues. And then, a black SUV pulls up. Not a scheduled vehicle. Not a registered one. A private, high-end, fully tinted luxury SUV. Out steps Meghan, wearing a custom winter white ensemble, tailored gloves, diamond studs, and a look that says one thing. This is my moment. She's flanked by two assistants, a glam squad member with a portable ring light, and a man holding a clipboard with laminated pages. Onlookers, including junior staff, assumed she was arriving early for a quick meet and greet, or maybe a float photo op. Instead, she heads straight toward a curtain-side area marked Talent Overflow Storage, an area never used for VIP entrances. That's when things got strange. Within minutes, her team had set up a mini staging zone. The chair, the infamous velvet-lined, gold-framed sedan, was wheeled out of an unmarked box truck that had trailed her SUV. No one stopped them. No one knew it was coming. Not parade security. Not producers. Not the float operators. People just stood there frozen. One float technician told a reporter afterward. It was like she brought her own kingdom. Then came the instructions. According to multiple first-hand reports, Meghan's assistant began distributing printed call sheets, marked with the Archwell logo, listing Meghan's entrance choreography. It detailed the route, the timing, and a lift point just 20 feet from the live camera zone. Here's the kicker. The sheets listed 4 volunteers who would be expected to carry the chair. Except those 4 people, they were dancers, part of a completely unrelated float segment, and they had no idea they were expected to become human furniture. A Macy's official said, "We were dumbfounded. Meghan's team treated it like Broadway blocking. But this wasn't a musical. It was a live broadcast with city permits and liability rules. And they were about to break everyone." Meghan reportedly gestured toward the dancers, dressed in colorful, parade-themed costumes, and said with a smile, "You've been rehearsing for weeks. You're strong enough. This will be beautiful." The lead dancer stared in disbelief. Another muttered, "We're not doing this." And that's when the first argument broke out. An assistant from Meghan's team allegedly began pressuring the dance coordinator, repeating phrases like, "This is a simple lift. It's in the spirit of celebration," and, according to a now viral tweet, "Don't make this political." You read that right. Political. As if not carrying a royal in a velvet chair was some kind of ideological rebellion. Meanwhile, time was ticking. The parade start was minutes away. Cameras were warming up. Celebrities were being briefed. And here was Meghan, refusing to move from the staging area unless someone agreed to carry her chair. Parade security was called for the first time, but not by Meghan's team. By a staffer from another float, who reportedly told Dispatch, "We've got a major problem. Someone's trying to override protocol, with props and personnel not cleared." Within 5 minutes, a mid-level parade manager arrived to assess the situation. They were met by one of Meghan's aides, who, according to a leaked transcript from a radio mic, began calmly but firmly restating their position. The Duchess has rehearsed this internally. The choreography is time-sensitive. It's aligned with her narrative and timed for first camera cutaway. Let that sink in. Aligned with her narrative. This wasn't about joining the parade. This was about owning it. About rewriting it into her own cinematic moment of return, redemption, and regality. And it wasn't just the chair. Reports say Meghan also had a makeup artist standing by with a full kit, including portable heating pads to keep her cheeks flushed and a subtle mist sprayer for her hair. One staffer joked, "She was more ready for a Vogue cover shoot than a parade walk." As the production manager tried to de-escalate, Meghan herself reportedly stepped in. Witnesses say she smiled, extended a hand, and said, "Let's not make this difficult. The audience will love it." And here's where the tension broke. The manager replied, politely but firmly, "Ma'am, this is not in the broadcast plan. If you proceed without clearance, we will have to remove the segment entirely." And Meghan? According to 2 independent eyewitnesses, she responded with 5 words that would go down in Macy's parade history. "If they don't carry me, I walk." There it was. The royal ultimatum. Not a suggestion, not a request, a demand. At that exact moment, security was called again, this time by the parade's head of safety, who had been monitoring the situation via walkie. They began moving toward the area. But here's the twist. Before security could intervene, Meghan changed tactics. She turned to a nearby group of child performers, dressed as toy soldiers for a different float, and reportedly began complimenting them. Sources say she asked one child, "Do you think it would be fun to carry a queen?" The child laughed. An adult didn't. A parent watching nearby stepped in and told Meghan, bluntly, "They're not here for that." And just like that, the magic cracked again. This wasn't Disney. This wasn't a movie set. This was a real parade, with real children, real professionals, and real stakes. Meghan was unraveling. She tried one last push, this time suggesting the chair simply be placed along the route and that she would sit in it briefly as a visual motif. But by then, it was too late. Parade officials had made their decision. The chair was to be removed. Immediately, Meghan was instructed to either join the general talent staging area, on foot, or withdraw from the broadcast entirely. Her response? Reportedly, silence, followed by a slow walk back to the chair, a whispered conversation with her assistant, and then a curt wave toward the staging zone. And that's when security officially stepped in, approaching calmly, discreetly, and with the full authority of Macy's legal team behind them. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. Meghan still wasn't done. Because just before the feed went live, just as the crowd roared and the confetti cannons fired, she made one final move. And what she tried next? It would turn this PR debacle into a full-blown media circus. What do you do when your plan to steal the spotlight falls apart? Live, in front of millions. If you're Meghan Markle on Thanksgiving morning 2025, you double down. You pivot. You stage one last grand act. Because the chair may have been banned. The dancers may have refused. The parade officials may have called security. But Meghan? Meghan still had her crown. Yes, an actual crown. Let's go there. It was subtle at first, tucked inside a padded box carried by her stylist, labeled Accessory Option 3. Parade staff didn't notice it during the early chaos because their attention was locked on the chair. But as the Macy staff removed the now controversial sedan, rolling it discreetly back behind the barricade, Meghan pulled out her next weapon. A gleaming, crystal-studded headpiece. Not quite a tiara, not quite a costume prop. Something in between. It shimmered in the morning light. Delicate, dramatic, and very intentional. This wasn't just for sparkle. This was messaging. Because in that moment, Meghan knew the camera feed was minutes from rolling. Producers were scrambling. And public attention? Seconds from locking in. What better way to reassert dominance, after being told no, than to quietly place a crown atop her own head? Think about the symbolism. She couldn't be carried. She wouldn't get her float. But she could still frame herself as royalty, literally. Insiders say the move caught even her own team off guard. One of her assistants allegedly asked, "Are we doing the crown now?" And Meghan reportedly replied, "Yes. Let's give them what they came for." But here's the plot twist. No one had actually invited her to appear on a float anymore. After the chair fiasco, producers had decided to remove her entirely from the lineup. No camera cue, no wave, no float. She had been cut. But Meghan wasn't leaving. She slipped into the crowd of performers. Walking confidently between two clusters of volunteers, holding a warm smile and waving like nothing had happened. For a moment, parade handlers weren't even sure what to do. She wasn't technically violating any law. She wasn't threatening anyone. But she also wasn't supposed to be there. This wasn't participation, it was infiltration. And it worked. Camera 3, panning across the staging area, briefly caught her silhouette. White coat, gold crown, half wave, just a glimpse. But enough for viewers at home to pause and ask, wait, was that Meghan Markle? The internet lit up instantly. Is Meghan in the parade? Was that a crown? Why wasn't she on a float? TikTok exploded with slowed-down replays, freeze frames, analysis videos breaking down her walk, her expression, her posture. And right as the wave of curiosity peaked, everything imploded. Because backstage, the temperature dropped below freezing. Multiple float directors began shouting into radios. One yelled, "She's not cleared." Who let her into segment 4? Security scrambled. Parade organizers realized that if Meghan stayed in the route, she would eventually appear, unannounced, unauthorized, directly in front of the live national broadcast. This was no longer about diva behavior. It was about legal liability. Because if anything went wrong, if someone tripped, if a balloon shift happened, if the crowd misread her presence, it would fall on Macy's. They had to act. Fast. And so, just as Meghan reached the edge of camera range, still smiling, still waving, two members of parade security approached from the side. What happened next depends on who you ask. Meghan's camp would later claim she was escorted with dignity and that she chose to step aside, once told she was off schedule. But according to at least 3 eyewitnesses, including one off-duty NYPD officer working crowd control, there was tension. One described it as polite but firm. Another said, she looked shocked, like she couldn't believe they were actually stopping her. But perhaps the most dramatic detail? One source says she looked directly at a parade supervisor and asked, "Do you know who I am?" To which the supervisor allegedly replied, "Yes, and this parade isn't about you." And just like that, she was gone. Not forcibly dragged, not arrested, but decisively removed. Shuffled offstage by security in full view of stunned volunteers, confused performers, and rapidly texting PR reps. The crown? Slipped back into the box. The glam team? Dispersed. The chair? Now sitting in a storage unit somewhere in New Jersey, collecting dust and irony. And yet, the moment wasn't over. Because while the live broadcast carried on, balloons soaring, Broadway numbers dazzling, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube were devouring the drama behind the scenes. Clips of the chair being removed, screenshots of Meghan's wave, zoom-ins on the crown. Speculation flew. Had she tried to hijack the parade? Was it a publicity stunt? A misunderstanding? And most damning of all, why had she acted like she was still part of the event after being cut? That's when the leaks began. First, it was a blurry image of the chair backstage. Then, a video of her team distributing the call sheets with carrier instructions. Then a leaked text thread from a dancer. She wanted us to carry her. Like Cleopatra. Dead serious. The narrative shifted fast. This wasn't just eccentric behavior. It was entitlement. It was control. It was someone trying to bend one of America's most sacred public events into a personal coronation. And it backfired. Hard. Sponsors began calling Macy's, asking what the hell had happened. Journalists flooded PR reps. Other celebrities, some privately, some publicly, expressed frustration. One influencer tweeted, "Thanksgiving is about gratitude, not grandeur." Someone missed the memo. But amid the fallout, one question loomed larger than the others. Why? Why would Meghan do this? Why demand to be carried? Why wear a crown? Why refuse to walk away quietly when told no? And the answer? Well, it depends on which version of Meghan Markle you believe. The misunderstood woman who never got a fair shot? Or the PR-savvy, spotlight-obsessed figure who believes she's still owed a throne? Because after this incident, public perception wasn't just shaken, it was shifting. Even some of her longtime defenders started asking, is this really about advocacy or ego? And the parade? It moved on. The floats kept rolling. The dancers kept dancing. The balloons soared. But behind the scenes, fallout was building. Emails were flying. Phone calls were being logged. And by the end of that very afternoon, a much bigger problem had landed in Meghan's lap. Because someone high up, very high up, had seen the footage. And they weren't amused. What kind of person looks at a group of young parade performers, exhausted, rehearsed, and ready to march, and says, "You, pick up my chair"? It wasn't a movie line. It wasn't satire. It wasn't whispered in jest. It was real. It was live. And it left everyone within earshot in stunned silence. After being denied a float, after having her throne chair quietly removed, after slipping a crown onto her head like it was her birthright, Meghan Markle, in front of stunned dancers, stunned security, and stunned assistants, made one final demand that would echo across Manhattan and social media in equal measure. Get them to carry me now. That's what one dance coordinator, who spoke anonymously to the press, claimed she heard Meghan say twice. And the them? A small group of teen performers, dressed in matching costumes, part of a scheduled choreographed dance team from a performing arts school in New Jersey. Barely old enough to vote, not part of Meghan's entourage, not trained in stage lifting, not employees, just excited kids performing in one of the biggest moments of their young lives. But to Meghan, they were something else, a last-minute lifeline, a way to save the scene, a path to salvage the coronation narrative. Let's rewind just a few minutes before that moment. After being escorted away from the parade's active zone, and after the chair was confiscated, Meghan reportedly ducked behind a sound booth near West 61st Street, speaking rapidly with one of her assistants. According to an internal report from a Macy staffer, her team was panicking. They had no screen time, no confirmed position, no presence in the live rundown. She was out, and that wasn't the plan. The original plan, what Meghan had envisioned for months, wasn't just about being in the parade. It was about owning it, being the unexpected star, the viral queen. A flood of screenshots, adoring hashtags, influencer praise, a PR rebirth. But now, that dream was slipping, and Meghan doesn't do silence. So she turned to improvisation. That's when she spotted the dancers. Colorful, costumed, coordinated, milling near the staging area, just moments from their own segment. Reports say she approached calmly, confidently, smiling, like nothing had gone wrong. She asked one of the girls, "Are you excited?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. Then Meghan looked at the group and allegedly said, "Would you like to be part of something magical?" Cue confusion. One of the dance instructors, catching wind of the interaction, stepped forward. She thought it was a friendly photo request, maybe a video shout-out, normal celeb stuff. Then Meghan dropped it. I'd like you to carry me. Just for a few feet. It'll look beautiful on camera. The instructor blinked. You want them to what? Meghan gestured toward the now missing sedan chair. We can recreate the moment. Just a soft lift. Symbolic. According to an eyewitness, one of the dancers literally laughed out loud, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Another teen reportedly said, I'm sorry, but we can't. We have to dance. We've been practicing this all year. Meghan smiled, tight, professional, but her tone changed. She looked toward her assistant and said, Get them to carry me, now. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't playful. It was a command. Let that sink in. A former working royal, at one of the most heavily watched events in America, trying to co-opt minors to perform unpaid labor for an unscheduled, unapproved segment. All while producers were scrambling, security was tightening, and live feeds were locking in. And all for what? A 20-second walk, a slow regal lift, an image, an illusion that she was still the Duchess, still revered, still in control. But this wasn't Buckingham Palace, and the people around her weren't Palisades. They pushed back. One of the dance team's parents, standing nearby, reportedly approached Meghan directly and said, Ma'am, my daughter is not carrying you. This is her moment, not yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Meghan's assistant looked shaken. Then, as if trying to recalibrate, Meghan changed her approach, as she offered to include the dancers in a wider artistic movement. She said she had vision, that this could be empowering for them. But it was too late. The story had already shifted from eccentricity to egotism. A PR intern nearby began texting frantically. A volunteer float supervisor called in a Category 3 escalation, internal code for VIP disruption in a controlled zone. Security rerouted 2 nearby floats just to avoid the scene. And yet, Meghan didn't move. She stood there, silent, watching the teens line up for their choreography, still wearing the crown. It was as if she believed, for just a second longer, that someone, anyone, might still bend. But no one did. Not the dancers, not the instructors, not the parents, and not Macy's. So security returned. This time, firmer, not with force, but with finality. A senior security coordinator stepped forward and issued a direct statement. You are no longer part of the broadcast zone. Any attempt to re-enter the segment area will be considered trespassing. Meghan blinked, stared. Her smile dropped. Then, she reportedly whispered to her assistant, They don't deserve the moment. And with that, she turned and walked away. No carriage, no float, no choir, no dancers. Just her fading entourage, and the haunting weight of a plan gone spectacularly wrong. But this wasn't the end. Because within hours, what happened next would turn a private meltdown into a full-scale public relations inferno. The dancers? They talked. The instructors? They leaked. The parents? They posted. And one post in particular, written by a 15-year-old girl who had been approached by Meghan herself, would ignite a digital wildfire across social media that no PR team could put out. She simply wrote, I was asked to carry Meghan Markle today. I said no. I'm dancing instead. One photo, one quote, one defiant refusal. It went viral within an hour. And that single sentence would trigger the next wave of chaos. One that involved media leaks, staff resignations, and a direct phone call from someone very high up. Who do you call when the stage collapses, the audience boos, and your team starts to look at you sideways? If you're Meghan Markle, you call the CEO. Not a manager, not a PR handler, not a parade coordinator. You go straight to the top. Because when the velvet chair got rolled away, when dancers refused to carry her, when security told her, this isn't your moment, Meghan didn't retreat. She escalated. And what followed was a desperate, last-ditch power play that had senior executives across Macy's headquarters blinking at their phones and asking the same thing. Is she serious? Let's unpack it. As Chapter 5 closed, Meghan had just been publicly and humiliatingly denied participation in the parade. Her chair was gone. Her spot in the route was revoked. Her improvised attempt to commandeer performers had backfired. Security had given her a final warning. But Meghan? She still wasn't ready to exit. Because in her world, no doesn't mean no. It means call someone with more power. Multiple sources now confirm that immediately following her last security run-in, Meghan stepped into a black SUV parked nearby, closed the door, and made a phone call. Not to a friend, not to her husband, but to a C-suite executive at Macy's Inc. Yes, the Macy's, the parent company of the parade. The corporation behind the branding, logistics, and multi-million-dollar media partnership. And how did she get the number? That's still unclear. But insiders suspect one of her Hollywood PR contacts provided a back channel, perhaps a favor called in from the upper echelons of talent relations. Either way, the call happened, and it didn't go as Meghan hoped. Here's how it reportedly unfolded. Meghan, calm but assertive, introduced herself, then launched into a diplomatic, but loaded, explanation of the misunderstandings on the ground. She expressed concern over logistical miscommunications, stressed her commitment to uplifting messaging, and reminded the executive that she wasn't here to cause disruption, but to create a meaningful moment. But beneath the polished delivery was a clear subtext. Fix this. Let me back in. I belong here. She argued that she had prepared for months, that she'd aligned her messaging with the holiday theme of gratitude and resilience, that her vision had been misinterpreted. And then, reportedly, she said this. This is a public celebration. I am part of the public. I've inspired millions of women around the world. I just want to stand for something. That line, it didn't land the way she thought it would, because the CEO, already briefed on the morning's chaos, wasn't buying it. They'd heard about the float demands, the throne chair, the unauthorized costuming, the attempted use of minors for human lift, the crown, the defiance, and most damning of all, the potential lawsuit already being drafted by a parade sponsor furious over their segment being delayed due to unauthorized talent interference. The CEO's response? Reportedly respectful, but unmoved. They made it clear. The parade had protocols. The parade had legal liabilities. And no, she could not re-enter the broadcast. But Meghan persisted. One staffer monitoring the call claimed she invoked optics. She referenced her work with nonprofits. She questioned why others were getting screen time with less impact. She may have even floated the possibility of post-parade interviews to reframe the narrative in Macy's favor. It didn't work. The executive thanked her for the call, then reiterated, "The broadcast lineup is final. There's nothing further we can do." The phone went dead, and in that moment, inside the quiet of the SUV, crown removed, glam team silent, Meghan Markle ran out of cards. But the story doesn't end there. Because someone leaked the call. By nightfall, the press got wind that Meghan had personally lobbied Macy's leadership for reinstatement. The term begged was used by a tabloid. Another called it a meltdown plea. And the public? They pounced. Twitter turned savage. TikTok reenactments of the call flooded the For You page. Voice actors playing Meghan in exaggerated accents, sarcastically pleading to be carried on a throne like Marie Antoinette in Manhattan. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Queen of Delusion. Hashtag Carry Me Crisis. Hashtag Meghan vs. Macy's. Hashtag Throne Zone. Even late-night hosts jumped in. On that night's monologue, one comedian quipped, Meghan tried to hijack the parade, and when that didn't work, she tried to hijack the C-suite. Someone tell her Macy's doesn't do Duchess discounts. But perhaps the most brutal response came from inside her own camp. One anonymous staffer, speaking to a British tabloid, said, "This wasn't a PR appearance gone wrong. It was a full-blown fantasy collapsing in real time. We weren't handling an event. We were managing an ego spiral. And it wasn't just public perception crumbling. Internally, cracks were forming. 2 junior PR assistants quit within 24 hours. One floated resume feelers to rival agencies before the day was over. Another allegedly called a friend sobbing, saying she wouldn't listen. She really thought they'd carry her. But just when the narrative seemed like it couldn't get worse, it did. Because Meghan's call hadn't just reached Macy's. According to newly surfaced reports, a legal liaison for NBC, who held partial broadcast rights for the parade, had been looped in earlier that day when security was first called. They now had concerns about footage, about liability, about possible unauthorized filming by Meghan's personal team. Yes, filming. That's right. Because rumor has it that Meghan's personal videographer had been recording portions of the morning's chaos. On a handheld camera, close-ups, reaction shots, even moments during the confrontation with dancers. And that meant one thing. Meghan may have been quietly producing her own version of the event all along. Was it meant for a future documentary? A social media redemption arc? A possible short-form visual essay for Archewell's next big relaunch? We don't know yet. But NBC wanted answers. Fast. Their legal team reportedly reached out to Meghan's representation the same day, requesting assurance that no parade footage shot outside the authorized media guidelines would be used commercially or broadcast. Macy's backed them up. By 6 p.m. that evening, Meghan's entire team was locked in frantic calls, not about the parade, but about damage control. And meanwhile, the internet only grew more brutal. One trending meme, a photo of Meghan's throne with the caption, "One seat available at Macy's lost and found. Comes with delusion, no humility." The press dubbed it the throne that broke Thanksgiving. But the biggest blow? It wasn't the chair. It wasn't the crown. It wasn't even the CEO rejection. It was the growing realization that Meghan had once again misread the room. Spectacularly. This wasn't London. This wasn't the palace. This was New York. And New York doesn't carry anyone. Especially not down the middle of 6th Avenue in a velvet chair while kids perform and brass bands march. But the backlash wasn't over yet. Because as Meghan scrambled to contain the media firestorm, something far more dangerous was about to leak. Not from the press, not from the internet, but from inside her own camp. How do you hijack the internet without even making it on screen? Meghan Markle didn't just miss her big moment. She didn't just fumble the optics. She detonated a digital bomb that went off before the first balloon even left the pavement. Because while the parade was prepping its broadcast feed and crowds were lining the streets of Manhattan, the real show, the one that no one planned, was already going viral. Not through official media channels, not via Macy's cameras, but through shaky iPhones, blurred TikToks, backstage DMs, and one unfiltered app, Twitter/X. The internet didn't wait for the confetti. It came for the chaos. Let's back up. It started with a single tweet, posted by a 17-year-old junior dancer, just hours before the first float was set to roll. Meghan Markle just asked our team if we could carry her in a chair. At a Thanksgiving parade. At 7 a.m. I'm shaking. Followed by a grainy photo, a velvet-lined chair, half unwrapped, sitting by a parade gate. No caption. No context. Just the chair. The tweet hit 5,000 retweets in less than 10 minutes. By the 20-minute mark, it had over 100,000 views. And by the time the official Macy's stream even began, the hashtags were trending. Hashtag ThroneGate. Hashtag Parade Princess. Hashtag CarryMeMeghan. Hashtag Duchess of Delusion. Within the hour, TikTok had caught up. Multiple performers from various float groups began stitching together eyewitness accounts. Whispered clips recorded on greenroom phones. Staffers in mascot suits mouthing, "We're not allowed to film this, but OMG." One viral video showed the moment security wheeled away the throne chair while Meghan, off camera, appeared to protest quietly. The caption? Security removing entitlement from the premises. The audio was shaky, the angle terrible, but it didn't matter. The mood was set. The meme machine was activated. And nothing goes as viral as celebrity ego caught in real time. Here's how it escalated. 1. The dancer thread. A dancer's parent, watching from the barricades, posted a thread describing how Meghan had approached the kids, asked them to help her create a regal moment, and then sulked when they declined. The parent's final line hit like a hammer. This wasn't about empowerment. It was about performance, hers. That tweet alone racked up over 9 million impressions in the first hour. 2. The Glam Team selfie. A leaked photo surfaced from an anonymous burner account showing Meghan's glam squad touching up her hair next to the velvet chair. The tweet read, "She brought a throne, a crown, and a light crew to a parade." The comments were brutal. Thanksgiving? More like thanks for nothing. She really thought this was the coronation. Girl, this isn't Buckingham. This is Broadway and balloons. 3. The audio clip. Then came the real firestorm. An audio clip surfaced. Unconfirmed, but reportedly captured via a wireless mic accidentally left hot on a nearby parade staffer. In it, a woman's voice, allegedly Meghan, says, "They should feel honored. I don't need to explain myself." That single sentence became the moment. Clipped, stitched, subtitled, mocked. TikTokers set it to dramatic music. Remix DJs used it in EDM drops. A gospel choir even posted a harmony version. Within an hour, it had its own hashtag. Hashtag I don't need to explain myself. And then came the satire. Digital artists mocked up fake floats featuring Meghan being carried by cartoon pilgrims. AI-generated images of a royal parade with Meghan sitting atop a turkey-shaped throne. Even SNL actors began chiming in, hinting that the weekend's sketch lineup had just changed direction. But the most ruthless blow? Meghan was being mocked by both sides. Critics and fans. Americans and Brits. Gen Z, millennials, boomers. No one was defending it. Even her loyal fan pages went quiet, unsure how to spin it. And while Meghan's team scrambled to get in front of the storm, posting vague Instagram stories about creative freedom and artistic vision, the internet was already miles ahead. Because the real question wasn't what happened. It was why she thought this would work at all. Let's break it down. This wasn't a leaked private moment. This wasn't paparazzi stalking her at a gas station. This wasn't tabloid fiction. This was a public performance attempt at a nationally broadcast event where Meghan arrived with her own chair, own crown, and own unsanctioned agenda. And that made it ripe for mockery. Because Americans can forgive mistakes. They can forgive ego. But what they don't forgive is arrogance wrapped in pageantry at someone else's party. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is a ritual, a cultural artifact. You don't show up and rewrite the script, especially not in a velvet chair. So as the parade went on, cheerful, colorful, oblivious to the social media storm brewing just outside the shot, Meghan Markle was trending worldwide for a scene that never made it to air. And the fallout wasn't just online. It was immediate. Multiple sponsors of the parade requested post-show briefings. One brand executive from a major toy company reportedly told producers, "We're not paying to be associated with royal tantrums." Even NBC, which broadcast the event, began quietly preparing a contingency PR statement, just in case they had to confirm they intentionally cut Meghan from the feed. And all the while, Meghan's own team was imploding. One staffer allegedly quit on the spot, sending a resignation text that simply read, "I'm not doing Thronesgiving next year." Another was overheard in a coffee shop later that day muttering, she actually thought she could control the entire parade, like it was a scene from The Crown. But perhaps the most shocking twist of all, it wasn't that Meghan had misjudged the optics. It was that she may have filmed it herself. Because remember that handheld camera her assistant was seen carrying? The one spotted during rehearsals? The one aimed squarely at Meghan as she walked away from the security cordon? Yeah, that footage exists, and it may be in her hands. Which begs the question, was this just a PR disaster? Or a calculated performance that flopped, meant to be repackaged later as misunderstood art? Was Meghan planning to use the footage for her own upcoming project? A redemption doc? A video essay? Another Archwell short series on misunderstood women? And if so, what version of the story would she tell? Because here's the genius and danger of digital narratives in 2025. Facts are fluid. Footage can be edited. Reality can be reframed. And if Meghan's team holds the footage, they control the angle. Which means what we've seen so far, tweets, leaks, grainy iPhone videos, might be just one version of this tale. But before she could release her version, someone else was about to beat her to it. Because one of her ex-staffers, fed up with the chaos, was about to leak everything. Not to the press, not to tabloids, but to the public. There's a certain energy in the air when something breaks protocol at a national event. It's invisible, but everyone feels it. One moment, things are orderly, predictable. Then suddenly, eyes shift. Radios crackle. Earpieces buzz. That's the moment parade officials knew they were dealing with a full-blown crisis. Not a hiccup, not a diva request. A crisis. Because Meghan Markle wasn't just ignoring her denied appearance. She was bypassing boundaries. Floating through a tightly choreographed public event like she still had a throne, and everyone else was just an extra in her documentary. The final straw? Her refusal to leave the staging corridor after 3 separate warnings. And that's when the words were finally spoken into a walkie-talkie by a visibly stressed stage manager. "Security, step in. Let's unpack how it got there." By now, Meghan had been seen, crowned, waving, escorted, and returned. The internet was melting. Parade staff were whispering. Children's choirs were being moved for safety. and float directors were debating whether or not to literally block her physically from walking back into camera view. Why? Because she wouldn't leave. Sources confirm that after being escorted off the initial staging zone, Meghan lingered in what's known as the transitional talent buffer, a narrow space designed to hold performers between float sequences. She wasn't scheduled. She wasn't credentialed. She wasn't supposed to be there. But there she stood, back straight, crown intact, eyes locked on the main parade route. Observers described her posture as composed but defiant. She occasionally spoke into her phone. Her assistant stood by holding her bag. No panic. No fluster. Just waiting. For what? That's what no one knew. Had she been told to wait? No. Was she reconsidering her approach? Unlikely. According to a dancer nearby, Meghan said quietly to no one in particular. They'll come back. They always come back. That's the psychology of royalty. Even without a palace. Even without titles. Even when they've changed the locks and canceled your float. Somewhere in her mind, Meghan still believed someone would change the rules for her. Because they should. And maybe in her previous world they would have. But not here. Not on 6th Avenue. Not at Macy's parade. Because here's what Meghan underestimated. This event doesn't belong to celebrities. It belongs to America. No one is the star. Not the singers. Not the talk show hosts. Not even Santa Claus. And certainly not a Duchess who showed up with a velvet chair and demanded to be lifted like Cleopatra. So when she attempted to approach the float route again, reportedly stepping forward as if nothing had happened, security acted. Calmly. Quietly. Professionally. 3 men. Plain black jackets. Macy's badges. 1 woman supervisor with a clipboard and a body mic. No yelling. No force. Just presence. They stepped in front of her. Created a human triangle. Spoke quietly. Ma'am, please return to your designated vehicle. According to multiple witnesses, Meghan froze. Her expression shifted. She looked down, then back up. One observer described her face as a mixture of shock and calculation. She said nothing, just turned to her assistant and nodded. And yet, she didn't move. Not immediately. Instead, she asked a question that caught everyone off guard. Can I speak to the Grand Marshal? Now, for those unfamiliar, the Grand Marshal is typically a ceremonial figurehead, someone who rides in the parade as a symbolic guest of honor. They don't make production decisions. They don't approve security calls. They don't intervene in live event chaos. But Meghan? She apparently thought otherwise. Because when the security team told her the Grand Marshal was not available, Meghan reportedly said, "Tell him I'm requesting an audience." That line became legend. Parade volunteers were whispering it within the hour. One dancer was seen laughing backstage, muttering, "What is this, Game of Thrones?" But the security team didn't laugh. They simply repeated their directive. "Ma'am, please return to your vehicle. This is your final instruction." At that moment, all eyes were on her. Camera crew across the way, now aware of the disruption, were deliberately turning lenses away to avoid accidental footage. Producers were scrambling to keep the broadcast smooth, shuffling talent cues, repositioning child groups, even speeding up a few marching band placements. And Meghan? She blinked, straightened her jacket, and finally walked. Not with grace, not with tears, with silence. She walked back to her SUV, now idling near the overflow lot. Her assistant trailed behind. No words, no statement, no defiance. Just a slow walk away from the parade route she never made it onto. But even that wasn't the end. Because remember, her personal videographer had been rolling. Yes, even during the security removal. And according to one float assistant, as she entered the SUV, the camera turned to her face, and she whispered something. Something chilling. The assistant couldn't hear all of it. But they caught this. They'll say I was removed. But we know the truth. They weren't ready. Let that sink in. In Meghan's mind, this wasn't a humiliation. It was a story in the making. And that meant only one thing. The public backlash? The online roasting? The brand damage? To her, it was just Act 1. Because a woman who arrives at a parade with her own throne doesn't believe in failure. She believes in reframing, recasting, retelling. But there was one problem. One major, irreversible